In this video, we are going to talk about the mighty CDP Choline, its effects on dopamine and acetylcholine receptors, and a whole lot more coming up. All right, speaking of CDP choline, that is one of the main ingredients besides uridine, which is a very powerful nootropic compound in the Cortex stack. Running a special where you can get the only pre-made stack that works. That's a quote coming from most of our customers for $5 off using the coupon code 5. Basically, we tried to make a natural version of modafinil and or phenylpiracetam effect-wise with the Cortex stack. Day traders, corporate people, entrepreneurs, business people, Marine Corps soldiers, United States Army soldiers, everybody else in between uses the Cortex stack. It's very powerful. This is the sort of culmination of just about 6.5 years of nootropics experience at the time when I formulated the product into a commercial stack. Get it at livecortex.com, use the coupon code 5, get it for $5. If you guys are waiting to pull the trigger on Cortex, just pull the trigger. Take 2 capsules. Brain performance turns on. You get a whole lot done. You feel incredibly better. Your brain works better. You're going to thank me. Also run a special on the Smarter, Better, Faster book, which is really it's a stack list, a powerful stack list, the stuff I've really never talked about. A lot of it is just so extremely powerful. Take the stack, brain performance in 30 minutes, for the ensuing 5 hours. But it's also stuff illuminated that might take you 5 years to learn. Modafinil and coffee protocols, modafinil and theanine protocols, right? Microdosing aniracetam, choline sources and racetam, sublingual coliracetam and theacrine stacks. You wouldn't even believe it. Okay, turn brain performance on by getting the Smarter, Better, Faster book. Get it for $5 off at livecortex.com by using the coupon code 5. Okay, CDP choline. We chose CDP choline in the Cortex stack as one of the main ingredients because it's so impressive. Like, my whole goal was 2 things really. Build something very discernible that people notice and go, wow, this is really working. And number 2, build something that's multifactorial, meaning that the nootropic compounds in the stack work on a bunch of things. And CDP choline does that. So it increases acetylcholine receptor densities. That's making the receptor through which acetylcholine passes basically improve the signal strength of acetylcholine. The receptor density size increases, meaning that it responds better to the signal coming from acetylcholine from neurons. It does the same thing with dopamine. But also CDP choline does all these other interesting things. It increases quantities of alertness-based neurotransmitters, catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, facilitates better dopamine functionality as a result of dopamine receptor densities being improved too. So you've got acetylcholine receptor densities and dopamine receptor densities being improved. And for those of you who don't know what that means, receptor density increases and changes. It basically just means that the things that those neurochemicals do to the brain, dopamine motivation, dopamine being for motivation, and acetylcholine being for focus and memory and verbal fluency, are just enhanced via a better receptor density profile. But then there's this whole class of studies that demonstrates pretty definitively how CDP choline helps neurodegeneration. How in aging mice, how receptor densities of acetylcholine, receptor functionality of acetylcholine and receptor densities of dopamine decrease considerable amount as the rat ages. You've got control rats, and then you've got rats who took CDP choline. They put CDP choline into the rat's chow. And what they found was in the control rats who didn't take CDP choline that the receptor densities for dopamine and acetylcholine decreased significantly as they age, which is sort of normal, right? Those receptor densities decrease because it's a neurodegeneration thing. It happens when you age. It's the degeneration of your neuronal function as you age. But it was able to be attenuated, meaning stopped and reversed, when these rats took CDP choline. So in other words, the receptor densities of dopamine and acetylcholine actually increased as they age instead of decreasing. There's a study on this that's titled Changes in Brain Striatum Dopamine and Acetylcholine Receptors Induced by Chronic CDP Choline Treatment of Aging. Mice, where basically they talk about treated animals displayed an increase in the dopamine receptor densities of 11%. for those receiving 100 milligrams per kilogram, and 18% for those receiving 500 milligrams per kilogram, as compared to controlled aged animals, right? The control animals that didn't have the CDP choline. Controlled animals showed from 2 months to 19 months of life a 28% decrease in the receptor density. So this is pretty significant, right? So CDP choline works acutely in improving people's brain performance when they take it, if they're a 35-year-old male or female, or 50-year-old male or female. But then also in age, we can extrapolate this and sort of make some, some plausible predictions about aged humans, and we'll get to another study which talks about aged humans and the benefit of CDP choline in aged humans, where you're probably increasing receptor density and basically I'm trying to be as less scientific for those of you who aren't into that stuff. You're preserving neuronal functioning, acetylcholine and dopamine functioning in the brain as you age. You're reversing some of the neurodegeneration as you age by taking CDP choline. There's another study that is titled Current Knowledge on the Neuroprotective and Neurogenic Effects. Wait a minute, I lost my spot here. Yeah, neurogenerative properties of acetylcholine, which is another name of CDP choline, in acute ischemic stroke. And it talks about how CDP choline or acetylcholine affects the brain in response to stroke. But I want to read you basically the last few parts of this, which are incredibly important. Basically the conclusion. The conclusion states that experimental and clinical data support the evidence that acetylcholine, which again is another name for CDP choline, is a multimodal drug with prolonged therapeutic window and neuroprotective and neurodegenerative effects. Oh, neuro-regenerative effects, like we talked about. But here's the real specificity. Acetylcholine acts at various temporal and biochemical stages of the ischemic cascade and attenuates glutamate excitotoxicity, oxidative stress, apoptosis, and BBB dysfunction. So basically it prevents the brain from engaging in oxidative stress, cell death, excitotoxicity, which is basically like way too much of a particular neurotransmitter, in this case glutamate, which is toxic to the brain, and blood-brain barrier dysfunction, the barrier that's supposed to keep pathogens and other things out of the brain. It facilitates better function and prevents dysfunction of that. But that's not all. Here's where CDP choline becomes so awesome, and this is why we paired it with uridine in the cortex stack, because of neuroplasticity, which is like the brain's ability to constantly rewire itself and to be malleable and to change and to get better and to optimize and get more functional and get more awesome. This is why we take nootropics, right? One of the reasons anyway. Acetylcholine also modulates neurotransmitter metabolism, enhances neuroplasticity, that's the sort of growing of the brain, it's the malleability of the brain, activates neurogenesis, that's literally the spawning of new neurons in the brain. This is just stuff people think didn't happen until Eric Kandel, a neuroscientist in the 1990s, discovered neuroplasticity. Synaptogenesis, which is the creation of new synapses in the brain, and angiogenesis. Acute and long-term treatment with acetylcholine is safe and in most clinical studies is effective and improves functional outcome. Okay, so that's why CDP choline is so awesome. Increases dopamine receptor densities, right? You give aged mice CDP choline and you compare them to controlled aged mice that don't have CDP choline. The receptor densities for acetylcholine and dopamine decrease with the aged mice that don't have CDP choline. And then the decrease is reversed and they increase in mice that are aging that are just taking CDP choline, right? So it's exceptionally incredible. You give it to people with stroke, it helps partially restore dopaminergic and acetylcholine functions, and then it improves bioenergetics in the prefrontal cortex, improves synaptogenesis, neurogenesis, and all-around neuroplasticity. CDP choline should absolutely be on top 10 or top 15 for everybody. It's a very, very powerful nootropic compound in and of itself. Just to throw this in, that the dose range in my experience is really 75 to 500 milligrams. I stick on the very, very low end because I just don't need a lot of it. Some people's mileage is going to vary, but I would say if you're going to take it as a standalone, you absolutely can, and I would start with 75 milligrams. Work your way up in 25 milligram increments until you find a good solid sweet spot for you, and you will know because it is very, very noticeable. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, Ryan here. Thanks for watching. But if you want to take your brain game to the next level, you want to increase your focus, your verbal fluency, your mental energy, your ability to sit down and crank out work for hours at a time, secure a bottle of the Cortex Nootropics stack. Our customers are clear. This is the best pre-made stack on the planet. And hey, speaking of stacks, if you really want to take your nootropic stack game to the next level, secure the Smarter, Better, Faster book. This is a surgical guide to using nootropics for total mental dominance. You talk about stacks, we got stacks in there. Endless amounts of stacks, power stacks, verbal fluency stacks, working memory stacks. We've got modafinil strategies and everything else you can think of to include a whole sector on nootropics questions answered. Smarter, Better, Faster, the most powerful nootropics guide on the planet. livecortex.com. That's livecortex.com. We'll see you over there.